I built my life from scratch, and my family still has no idea who I really am. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but here I am, 30 years old, finally ready to tell it. My name is Erica, and this is the tale of how my life changed forever at just 13. Back then, we were what you'd call a normal family. Mom, Dad, and me, living in a cozy house on Maple Street. Dad worked in construction, and Mom was a part-time bookkeeper. We weren't rich, but we were happy, until everything fell apart. One regular Tuesday morning, Dad left for work, but he never came home. A construction accident took him from us in an instant. Mom was devastated, completely unraveling before my eyes. For hours, she'd sit silently, staring into nothingness, leaving me to fend for myself. At 13, I quickly learned to cook, clean, and take care of both of us, though nothing could prepare me for what came next. One evening, about 6 months after Dad's death, Mom sat at the kitchen table, her coffee cup trembling in her hands. "Erica, honey, I need to tell you something," she said, avoiding my eyes. "What is it?" I asked, already sensing the change in her. "I've met someone," she said. "His name is Robert, and he makes me happy again." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had noticed the late-night phone calls and the sudden attention she paid to her appearance, but I never thought she'd bring someone into our home. And yet, 2 weeks later, Robert moved in, bringing his 6-year-old daughter, Sarah. When Robert moved in, it didn't just feel like we had a new family. It felt like I was being replaced. Sarah, with her big blue eyes and blonde pigtails, was exactly the kind of daughter my mom always seemed to want. She was cute, bubbly, and adored by everyone. Mom doted on her constantly. "Look at her, Erica," Mom would say, smiling as Sarah colored quietly or played with her dolls. "Isn't she precious? She needs so much love and attention at this age." Attention. That word stung more than anything, because it was clear Sarah was getting all of it, while I became invisible. The first time I realized just how bad things were going to get was during a dinner about a week after Robert and Sarah moved in. Robert's mother, Mrs. Henderson, had come over. She took one look at me and said, "Oh, what a big girl you are." Then she reached over and pinched my cheek so hard I wanted to scream. "Such a pretty face," she cooed, her fingers digging into my skin like claws. "But Robert, this house would be absolutely perfect if..." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. I saw the way she looked at me, like I didn't belong. That night, when I showed Mom the bruises on my cheek, she just shook her head and said, "She didn't mean any harm, Erica. Don't be so sensitive." From that moment on, life at home became a routine, one I wasn't part of. Mom, Robert, and Sarah were a perfect little unit, always doing things together. Trips to the park, movie nights, family dinners filled with laughter. Meanwhile, I was shipped off to Mom's friend Janet's house more and more often. "Janet needs help with little Emily today," Mom would say without meeting my eyes. "You don't mind, do you?" At least at Janet's house, someone seemed happy to see me. Emily, with her bouncy curls and gap-toothed smile, would run to me, arms outstretched, screaming eerie. The moment I walked through the door, we'd build blanket forts, have tea parties with her stuffed animals, or read stories where I did all the silly voices. Janet, unlike my mom, actually paid attention to me. She asked about school and listened to my answers, something I hadn't experienced at home in a long time. It felt normal, like family should feel. Back at home, it was a different story. Mrs. Henderson practically lived with us, constantly rearranging furniture and criticizing everything. "These walls should be eggshell, not cream," she'd say. And the next thing I knew, Mom would be at the hardware store, picking out paint samples. Her favorite pastime, though, was tormenting me. She'd pinch my cheeks painfully during meals and criticize everything I did. "Still not holding your fork properly, I see," she'd say, digging her nails into my skin. "Your mother really should have taught you better manners." Meanwhile, Robert's temper was a storm always ready to break. If I knocked over a glass or dropped a plate while doing the dishes, he'd explode. "Do you know how much that cost?" he'd yell, his face turning red. "Of course you don't. You've never earned $1 in your life, have you? Just a freeloader living off my hard work." "I'm sorry," I'd mumble, trying to clean up the mess quickly. "Sorry doesn't replace things, does it? You eat my food, wear clothes I pay for, live in my house, and what do you contribute? Nothing." Each time something like this happened, I'd look to Mom, hoping she'd say something, anything, but she never did. She'd just busy herself cleaning or fussing over Sarah, pretending not to hear. By the time I turned 16, I had made a decision. I was done being invisible, done being treated like a burden. I couldn't rely on Mom to stand up for me or to see me for who I was. If I wanted to change my life, I had to do it myself. Early on my 16th birthday, while the rest of the house was still asleep, I got up, dressed quickly, and headed out with a stack of homemade flyers. They advertised my new dog walking service. I figured it was something I could do after school. And it was better than spending my afternoons at Janet's house feeling like an outsider. By the end of the day, I had 3 clients lined up. Mrs. Peterson, a kind but skeptical older woman from 2 streets over, handed me the leash of her golden retriever, Max. "Are you sure you can handle him? He's a strong boy," she said. "I'll be fine," I assured her, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I get good grades and I'm responsible with animals." It wasn't long before word spread, and soon I was walking 5 different dogs, watching the Martinez twins on weekends, and helping old Mr. Cooper with his grocery shopping. Janet even officially hired me as Emily's after-school nanny. Every dollar I earned, I saved. I didn't spend a cent on candy, clothes, or movies. Nothing like the other kids my age. After 3 months of hard work, I finally had enough to buy something I'd been dreaming about for a long time, a smartphone. It wasn't anything fancy, just a basic model on sale, but it was mine. I had earned it. The day I brought it home, I felt something I hadn't in years. Pride. For once, I had something that belonged to me, something no one could take away. I was sitting on my bed, setting up my new phone, when Sarah barged into my room without knocking, as usual. "What's that?" she demanded, pointing at the phone. "It's my new phone," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I bought it with money from my jobs." Her eyes went wide. "I want a phone," she declared. Before I could stop her, she ran downstairs, yelling, "Daddy, Erica has a phone, and I want one too." I felt my stomach drop. Moments later, Robert's heavy footsteps echoed up the stairs. He appeared in my doorway, his face already twisted into that familiar scowl. "What's this I hear about a phone?" he demanded. "I bought it myself," I explained quickly. "With my own money from working." Without a word, Robert walked over, grabbed the phone right out of my hands, and handed it to Sarah. "Daddy's got you covered, sweetheart," he said, ignoring me completely. I stood there stunned, my hands trembling with anger. "But I paid for that," I protested. "And now it belongs to Sarah," he said, his tone final. That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. At school the next day, I went straight to my English teacher, Mrs. Collins, and told her everything about the phone, about Robert's constant belittling, and about Mom's indifference. She listened quietly, her expression growing more serious with every word I said. "This isn't right, Erica," she said gently. "No one should have to live like that." She took me to the principal's office, where they called my mom in for a meeting. I wasn't allowed to sit in, but I could hear the raised voices through the door. When Mom finally came out, her face was red with anger. She thrust my phone at me without meeting my eyes. "Here," she said through clenched teeth. "I hope you're happy now." That night, after Sarah cried for hours about losing her phone, Mom stormed into my room. "How dare you go behind our backs like that?" she hissed. "Do you know how embarrassing that was for me? You're nothing but a traitor." For the next 2 weeks, Mom and Robert pretended I didn't exist. They spoke around me as if I weren't there, passed dishes right past me at dinner, and ignored any attempt I made to talk to them. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I didn't let it break me. 2 years passed in much the same way. I focused on my jobs and my studies, knowing that education was my ticket out of that house. Senior year came, and I applied for every scholarship I could find, hoping I'd earn enough to cover college without having to rely on Mom or Robert for a dime. The day the letter arrived from State College, I nearly threw up from nervousness. My hands shook as I opened the envelope in my room alone. "Dear Miss Thompson, we are pleased to inform you." I had to read the words 3 times before they sank in. I'd been awarded a full scholarship, full tuition, room and board. I wouldn't have to pay for anything. I was going to college. That night at dinner, I decided to share my news. I didn't expect a parade, but part of me foolishly hoped that maybe this would finally make Mom proud. Maybe she'd see me again. "Mom, Robert, I have some good news," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. I got accepted to State College. Robert's fork clattered against his plate. "You applied to college without telling me," he demanded. "Who do you think you are, making decisions like that behind my back?" "It's a full scholarship," I tried to explain. "You won't have to pay anything." "Damn right I'm not paying anything," he spat. "Not a single cent for an ungrateful freeloader like you." I looked at Mom, desperate for her to say something, anything. But when she finally met my eyes, her gaze was cold. "Why should I stand up for you?" she said quietly. "All you've ever done is cause trouble. You've never shown respect for this family." Respect. That word echoed in my mind, and something inside me snapped. "I don't respect him because he's a bully," I shouted. "He's cruel, and you let him treat me like garbage." Before I could say another word, Mom slapped me across the face. "Get out," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. Then louder, "Get out of my house." I didn't cry that night. I didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't even pack much. Instead, I grabbed my backpack, stuffed in a few clothes, my scholarship acceptance letter, and my phone, the one thing Robert hadn't managed to take from me, and walked out. It was strange how quiet the world felt once I left the house. The air was cold, but it didn't bite the way Robert's words did, and the night sky above seemed more open than it had ever been before. I had nowhere to go, no plan beyond getting out. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I walked until my legs ached, heading toward the only place that had ever felt safe. The small park near the edge of town. It was where I used to go as a kid when things got bad at home, a place where no one could bother me. I found a bench near the swings and sat down, shivering as the wind picked up. "What now?" I whispered to myself, gripping my backpack tightly. I didn't have long to sit and think before my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting some angry message from Mom or maybe even Janet. But the name on the screen surprised me, Mrs. Collins. I hesitated, wondering if I should answer. But something told me that if anyone could help, it was her. "Hello," I said, my voice shaky from the cold. "Erica, are you okay?" Mrs. Collins asked, her voice filled with concern. "I just got a call from the principal's office. Your mom told them you ran away." "I didn't run away," I said, feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion. "She kicked me out." There was a pause on the other end, and then Mrs. Collins said, "Where are you?" "At the park," I admitted quietly. "I don't know what to do." "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." 15 minutes later, a car pulled up near the entrance to the park. I recognized Mrs. Collins's old silver sedan immediately. She stepped out, wrapped in a thick coat, and hurried over to me. "Come on, let's get you inside where it's warm," she said gently, opening the passenger door. I didn't argue. The warmth of the car hit me like a wave as I climbed in, and for a moment, I just sat there, too tired to speak. Mrs. Collins didn't press me. She waited until I was ready. After a few minutes, I found my voice. "Thank you," I said quietly. I didn't know who else to call. "I'm glad you answered," she said. "You don't have to go through this alone, Erica. There are people who care about you." We drove in silence for a while until we reached her house. It was small but cozy, with a neatly trimmed lawn and a porch swing. She led me inside, where the smell of freshly baked cookies filled the air. "You can stay here tonight," she said. "We'll figure out what to do in the morning." Over the next few days, Mrs. Collins helped me get everything sorted out. She took me to the local youth shelter, where I met with a social worker named Karen. Karen was kind, with warm eyes and a reassuring smile. She explained that since I was close to turning 18, they could help me find temporary housing and connect me with resources to stay on track for college. "Once you turn 18, you'll be legally independent," she said. "But until then, we'll make sure you're safe." It felt strange, being surrounded by people who wanted to help. For so long, I'd felt like a burden, like someone no one wanted around. But now, I was starting to see that maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Mrs. Collins checked in on me regularly, bringing me homemade meals and helping me with my college preparations. She even offered to drive me to campus when the time came. "You have a bright future ahead of you, Erica," she said one evening as we sat together, going over my scholarship paperwork. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." Her words stayed with me, becoming a mantra I repeated to myself whenever doubt crept in. The day I moved into my dorm at State College was one of the happiest days of my life. As I unpacked my things and arranged my new room, I felt a sense of freedom I had never known before. I was finally starting a new chapter, one where I could be whoever I wanted to be. But even as I settled into college life, I couldn't shake the memories of home. The anger, the pain, the feeling of being invisible, it all lingered like a shadow I couldn't outrun. I knew I couldn't carry that weight forever. If I wanted to truly move on, I had to confront my past, not by going back, but by finding a way to let go. College was everything I had dreamed it would be: freedom, new friends, and endless possibilities. My days were filled with classes, study groups, and late-night conversations in the dorm common room. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But even in the middle of all the newness, the past followed me like a shadow. It crept into my dreams, turning them into vivid reminders of what I had left behind. In the daylight, I could push those thoughts aside, but at night, alone in my dorm, they came rushing back. One night, after waking up from yet another nightmare about Robert, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat on the edge of my bed, trembling as I tried to steady my breathing. My roommate, Jess, stirred slightly in her sleep but didn't wake. I envied her peacefulness, her ability to drift through life without the weight of the past dragging her down. I grabbed my phone and stared at the screen. The time read 3:12 a.m. I wasn't sure why I did it, but I scrolled through my contacts until I found Karen's number. She had told me I could call anytime if I ever needed to talk. Maybe she didn't mean it literally, but in that moment, I didn't care. I needed someone to remind me I wasn't crazy for still feeling haunted by a life I had left behind. I sent her a simple text. "Are you awake?" To my surprise, she replied almost instantly, "Yes. Are you okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "Can we talk?" She called me a moment later, her voice calm and reassuring despite the late hour. "Erica, what's going on?" I hesitated, unsure how to put my feelings into words. "I keep thinking about everything," I finally said. "No matter how hard I try to move on, it's still with me." "That's normal," Karen said gently. "You went through a lot, and healing takes time. It's not something you can rush or force, but you're stronger than you think. You've already come so far." "I don't feel strong," I whispered. "I feel stuck." "That's why it helps to talk about it," she said. "Have you thought about counseling? There are free services on campus. It might help you work through some of what you're feeling." I didn't respond right away. The idea of talking to a stranger about my past felt daunting, but so did the thought of living with this constant weight on my chest. Maybe Karen was right. Maybe it was time to face the ghosts I had been running from. The following week, I made an appointment with the campus counseling center. My counselor, Dr. Patel, was a kind woman with a warm smile and a soft voice. She didn't push me to talk about anything I wasn't ready to share. Instead, she let me open up at my own pace. "It sounds like you've been carrying a lot on your own for a long time," she said after I told her about my life with Robert and my decision to leave. "That kind of burden can make it hard to trust people or even trust yourself." I nodded. Sometimes I feel like I don't deserve to be here. Like I'm just pretending to be someone who belongs. "That's a common feeling for people who've experienced trauma," Dr. Patel said. "It's called imposter syndrome. But you earned your place here, Erica. No one gave it to you. You worked for it." Her words were comforting, but they didn't erase the doubts entirely. Still, I kept coming back, session after session, slowly peeling back the layers of pain and fear I had hidden away for so long. Outside of counseling, life at college continued to unfold. I joined a creative writing club, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the courage to try. The club became a place where I could express myself freely, where my words didn't have to be perfect. They just had to be mine. Jess, my roommate, became one of my closest friends. She didn't know everything about my past, but she knew enough to understand that I needed support. She had a way of making me laugh when I felt like crying, and for that, I was grateful. One night, after a particularly tough day, she sat next to me on my bed, offering me a cup of hot chocolate. "You know, you don't have to do everything alone," she said. "I'm here if you ever want to talk." I smiled weakly. "Thanks, Jess. I appreciate it." And for the first time in a long time, I started to believe that maybe I wasn't as alone as I had once thought. One of Dr. Patel's suggestions was to write letters to the people who had hurt me. Not to send them, but to get the words out of my head and onto paper. At first, the idea felt strange, But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had bottled up inside. I started with a letter to Robert. Dear Robert, you probably don't care, but I need to say this anyway. You made me feel like I was worthless, like nothing I ever did was good enough. You took away my confidence, my happiness, and for a long time, my hope. But you didn't break me. I'm still here, still standing, and I won't let you define who I am anymore. I don't forgive you, not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm done letting you control my life. Erica. Writing a letter was harder than I had expected, but when I finished, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't need Robert to read it. I didn't need him to acknowledge the pain he had caused. This was for me, not him. Over the next few weeks, I wrote more letters. One to my mother, one to Janet, even one to myself. Each letter helped me let go of a little more of the anger and hurt I had been holding on to. Time didn't heal all wounds, but it helped me learn how to live with them. College was a whirlwind of deadlines, friendships, and new experiences. But through it all, I carried the lessons I had learned from my past. Slowly, I found pieces of myself that I thought I had lost forever. Karen and I stayed in touch, and she became one of my biggest supporters. She was always just a call away when things got overwhelming. Dr. Patel continued to guide me through my healing journey, and by the end of the semester, I began to feel lighter, not entirely free from my past, but no longer chained to it either. Jess convinced me to go on a weekend trip with her and some friends. We drove out to a cabin by a lake, where the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, Jess turned to me and said, "You seem different now. Happier." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words. I think I'm finally learning how to let go. By the time I finished my first year of college, I felt like a different person, not entirely healed, but stronger, more resilient. I decided to stay on campus over the summer, working part-time at the library and continuing my sessions with Dr. Patel. One afternoon, while organizing books in the fiction section, I came across a novel with a title that caught my eye. The Road Home. I flipped through the pages, and a line stood out to me. Sometimes finding your way back doesn't mean returning to where you started. It means creating a new place to call home. That was exactly what I had done. I hadn't gone back to my old life. I had built a new one, piece by piece. That night, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. For months, I had been too scared to share my story, but something about that book made me realize that my voice mattered. Maybe my story could help someone else, just like Karen's story had helped me. I started typing. My name is Erica, and this is the story of how I learned to let go of the past and build a new future. The day I published my story online, I was overwhelmed by the response. People from all walks of life reached out, sharing their own experiences and thanking me for my honesty. It felt surreal to know that my words had touched so many lives. One message stood out. It was from a girl named Lily, who said she had been in an abusive relationship for 2 years, but had never found the courage to leave until she read my story. "You gave me hope," she wrote. "Thank you for showing me that it's possible to start over." In that moment, I realized that even though I couldn't change the past, I could shape the future, mine and maybe even someone else's. Life wasn't perfect, and I knew there would still be days when the shadows of my past tried to creep back in. But I also knew I had the strength to face them. I had learned how to listen to the whispers of my heart, not the ghosts of my past. Because in the end, we are more than the pain we carry. We are the stories we choose to write, the lives we choose to live. And this was only the beginning of mine.